I was sitting in a small, tucked-away cafe in Seoul last week. One of those places in Sangsu-dong that feels, more like a sterile art gallery than a coffee shop.
Oh, I know the type. Raw concrete, maybe one piece of art. Very minimalist.
Exactly. Raw concrete walls, a single jagged rock displayed on a table, and just absolute silence. So next to me is a friend visiting from the States.
Okay.
And he had come armed with a very specific expectation of the country. He was ready for the neon chaos, the Gangnam Style loudness, the whole viral intensity he'd seen on TikTok.
The complete sensory overload version of Seoul.
Right. And he kept looking around, almost fidgeting, waiting for it all to kick in. But then the barista brought his order. She didn't just slide it across the counter. She placed this heavy, rough-textured ceramic cup down with two hands, a slight bow, and this quiet deliberation that felt almost religious.
That's a powerful image.
My friend just froze. He stared at the drink, then at the empty space around him. The hype he was promised it was nowhere to be found.
So instead of a spectacle, he got a moment of intention.
A moment of total intention. And instead of pulling out his phone to live stream it, he just leaned back and whispered, "It's weird. It's so minimal, but it doesn't feel cold. It feels human."
It feels human.
Wow.
That reaction just stuck with me. It highlighted this massive gap between how we consume Korean culture as this loud global trend and what it actually is at its core.
The perception versus the reality.
Exactly. We see the headlines, the K-pop tours, but we rarely talk about the quiet geometry, that specific, persuasive emotional intelligence that allows a culture to be so restrained yet resonate so deeply.
And that's the real question, isn't it?
It is. Why has this specific aesthetic shifted from like a niche fascination to the world's reference point for modern living? It's not just about what they're exporting, it's about the warmth they are designing into the silence.
That quiet human warmth, that is the key we're unlocking today. Our mission is to take a deep dive into the very emotional blueprint of K-culture. We're going to analyze how these deeply indigenous social concepts, which are often, silent and hidden from outsiders,
How they connect.
how they connect directly to the vibrant, globally resonant popular culture we see everywhere, from K-pop stages to architectural design trends. We want to understand the persuasive power of this emotional integrity that makes Korean culture a global reference point for modern connection and aesthetic.
And I think that's the most critical starting point. If we try to analyze the success of the Korean ways purely through, say, marketing or production quality,
Right.
we miss the engine of its success.
We miss the why.
We miss the entire why. That engine is an emotional integrity that fosters deep, prolonged audience engagement. So we have to start with the concept that really defines the Korean ethos itself.
Jong.
Okay, so let's unpack this foundational concept, Jong. We know it refers to this complex tapestry of feelings, fondness, caring, bonding, attachment that develops within interpersonal relationships.
Right.
It's not just a feeling, it's
Right.
it's more like an atmosphere, right?
Uh-huh.
A state of being in relation to other people.
That's a perfect way to put it. And what's fascinating here, particularly for those of us raised in, highly individualistic cultures, is the location of this emotion.
Location, what do you mean?
Well, most Western psychological models view emotions, happiness, anger, even love as psychocentric. They belong to an individual person. They're inside you.
Right. My feelings are mine.
Exactly. Jong, however, is fundamentally inter-individual. It is an emotion involving two or more people. But even more profoundly, it's described as an extra-psychic state.
An extra-psychic state. That term alone just stops me in my tracks. It suggests the emotional reality exists outside of the individual self. It's in the space between people. How does someone from a Western background where, clear boundaries and autonomous emotional spaces are paramount even begin to internalize that? It requires a complete paradigm shift. Imagine an emotional field or like a gravity that is generated and sustained by the relationship itself, not by the independent wills of the people in it.
So the self in this model it has to be porous.
Inherently porous. I mean, the Korean and Chinese word for human being, in literally translates to between men. That reinforces this exact sense of self-definition through relation. This inter-individual location of Jong is keenly felt, and it is the fundamental building block of social bonding.
It sounds less like a choice and more like a gradual, almost elemental force that just shapes your consciousness. How does one acquire Jong?
Well, it's often described as primordial, passive, and slow to develop. You don't actively say, I am going to feel Jong for that person. That's not how it works.
It's not a decision.
Not at all. The common expression is Jong permeates me, or Jong dulda. It's a slow burn, a gradual infusion of commitment into the relationship. And the characteristics that accompany this permeation are things like sacrifice, unconditionality, deep empathy, sincerity.
And a willingness to share experiences. A sense of common fate.
A sense of common fate. That's the one.
That last point, common fate, that feels crucial. If my emotional reality is tied up with yours, then your success is my success, and your fate affects my fate directly. This mandates a completely different baseline for social interaction than what we might experience in the more transactional West.
Absolutely. And you can also think about what Jong is defined by what it isn't.
Okay.
It is the ultimate antithesis of rational, contractual, fairness-driven, or purely business-like relationships.
Right.
You cannot apply logic or a ledger book mentality to a Jong-based bond.
The moment you start counting.
The moment you start calculating effort or demanding quid pro quo fairness, you diminish or even destroy the Jong. It relies on selfless commitment and unconditionality.
If that is the societal expectation, we need to look at where that expectation is first established. And the source material points us to the earliest prototype, the mother's bond.
Yes, the term is mo-jong. This is the mother's warmth literally permeating the infant, who is often carried on her back.
That physical closeness.
Constant physical closeness. It establishes the foundational expectation for intense loyalty and commitment. And crucially, this commitment is often communicated not through explicit verbal requests or logical contracts, but through nonverbal means.
So we're talking about mind reading, right? The concept of ishim, jinshim.
Precisely. It's a profound reliance on intuition and nonverbal cues to understand the other person's needs and intentions, to anticipate them before they are even voiced.
Which is
a world away. This early bonding establishes what can be called a pre-Oedipal mode of relationship. It's deep, it's nonverbal, and it's centered on interdependence. This contrasts sharply with the typically more explicit, gender-oriented nature of what might be termed Western love, which often kicks in during later, more individualistic stages of development.
That notion that commitment is communicated through nonverbal mind reading, that must create immense social pressure, far beyond what we experience in the West, where we prize clarity and direct communication above all else. It makes sense, then, that this intense emotional glue, Jong, expands outward to create the defining collective identity, which is Wuri.
Wuri is the natural cultural manifestation of Jong. It represents that strong, essential bond, the we-ness.
There's a formula for it, isn't there?
There is. The simple but profound equation is I plus Jong plus I Wuri. This collective orientation dictates the self-image and the entire worldview.
So your identity isn't primarily defined by your unique personal achievements or your preferences, but by which Wuri group you belong to, your family, your school, your company.
Exactly. These Wuri groups become the sole source of self-identity and, critically, the primary source of protection from the often brutal hardships of life.
So it's a trade-off.
It is. The bond is unconditional, non-contractual, and illogical from an external, rational perspective. It requires dependency, but that dependency is rewarded with profound belonging.
This structure, then, it necessitates a really stark division between those inside the circle of protection and those outside. It establishes a we versus others worldview, Wuri versus nem.
That's the resulting social structure. And it's crucial to recognize how this differs from the Western model. In the West, we prioritize the distinction between our private and public spheres.
Right. What I do at home is separate from what I do at work.
In a Jong-based society, the key distinction is in-group, Wuri, versus out-group, non-nom. Within the Wuri group, loyalty is unquestioning because that group is actively protecting you. And to maintain that attachment, you must rigidly adhere to social and cultural norms.
It's hard to imagine operating in a we versus others world where there isn't really a meaningful private versus public sphere. Does that mean the expectation of perfection and adherence within the Wuri group is just relentless?
It can be.
It sounds exhausting, but also, I have to admit, incredibly secure.
Both are true. The security comes at the cost of intense social adherence. And this is why the violation of that bond is so psychologically devastating, which leads us directly to the pathology of betrayal, Han and Huabium.
Okay, so let's go there. What happens when that foundational bond of yang, this thing that gives you your identity, is violated?
The pathological process is directly proportional to the original warmth. The deeper and more tender the Jengong-based relationship, the more profound the agony, the high-end, when that bond is broken or loyalty is betrayed.
So it's a direct relationship.
A direct relationship. And crucially, Jong must exist first for Han to manifest. You can't have Han without first having had Jong. It's an anti-attachment response.
So Haiyan is not just standard anger or a grievance. It's something much, much deeper, tied to a sense of injustice.
It is. It's an intense, suppressed anger and indignation, and it carries a specific cognitive facet called ukwol.
Ukwol.
That word translates roughly to feeling unfairly victimized. This isn't just a personal slight. It's a culture-specific reaction to an intolerable violation of that expected unconditional loyalty. Because the self is defined by the Wuri group, the betrayal causes profound damage to the self-identity.
And if this state of suppressed, victimized anger is prolonged, it can manifest physically. That's Huabium, the anger syndrome.
Yes. Huabium is classified as a Korean culture-bound disorder, and it involves significant somatic and anxiety components. You should understand, this isn't just metaphoric anger. This anger manifests physically.
How so?
We're talking literal stomach knots, a feeling of a mass or a blockage in the epigastrium, intense dyspnea, which is shortness of breath palpitations, and often a very real acute fear of impending death.
Wow.
It is the bottled-up resentment, the ukwol, tied to the original trauma of a Jong violation that results in Huabium.
The sources drew an incredibly insightful comparative analogy here. It contrasted the psychological risks of this collective structure with the risks of our own hyper-individualistic one.
Right. We can draw a parallel between Huabium and, say, borderline personality disorder or BPD in a Western context.
Okay, lay that out for us.
Huabium is a maladaptation to a Jung-based collective culture where belonging and intense, uninhibited attachments are the societal mandate. When that bond is shattered, the consequence is this profound, suppressed, physicalized trauma.
Whereas in the West, where individual autonomy is the mandate.
BPD, in autonomy-emphasized Western societies, might be seen as a maladaptation, manifesting in often chaotic, unsuccessful efforts to seek that belongingness and those John-like bonds.
In a culture that doesn't structurally value or mandate them.
Exactly. In fact, that kind of dependency seeking is often pathologized here. So the risk of psychological breakdown is located in two completely opposite cultural mandates. In Korea, the trauma stems from the violation of too much enforced connection.
And in the West, it stems from the struggle against too little inherent connection.
Precisely.
That is a staggering realization. The quiet geometry we are discussing is therefore not just, a benign cultural preference. It's a system of deep psychological mandates that offers profound security, but at the cost of profound vulnerability to betrayal, this inherent warmth, this integrity. This is what we have to keep in mind as we pivot now to look at the cultural products they export globally.
It's the invisible foundation for everything we see.
So we move from the psychological basement to the cultural export. It's clear that this emotional blueprint, this emphasis on integrity and relational warmth, is expertly packaged. U.S. fans perceive Korean culture as capitalistic, much like their own, but fundamentally distinct on a cultural plane.
Right. It's not about the economics, it's about the feeling.
The difference isn't in the speed of the city, but in the social texture.
And that social texture often manifests instantly in the layer of formality, the honorific culture. The politeness and the embedded structure are instantly fascinating to outsiders.
You're talking about the careful differentiation between banmal or informal speech and gendarmal, formal speech.
That and the use of precise titles, nuna for an older sister, hung for an older brother, even for non-family members, based on incredibly small age differences.
It's such a striking contrast to the U.S., where we often default immediately to first names. We value casualness over hierarchy. I mean, one fan noted that in the U.S., you only start kicking in that kind of deferential respect when the age difference is decades, not mere months.
And this is a direct reflection of the Jong-based collective we just discussed. The formality is anti-individualistic. It emphasizes role boundaries and contextual orientation. The language itself prioritizes rapport talk, and that mind reading over pure, explicit face value communication.
The relationship structure comes first.
The relationship structure precedes the communication content. It enforces the commitment and loyalty learned early in life.
Another powerful element of the exported culture that people point to is the wholesome content advantage. Media K-pop, K-drama, variety shows is so often described as innocent, clean-cut, and child-friendly.
This wholesomeness is a massive international selling point. It offers a conscious alternative to much of what dominates Western media.
It feels like an emotional refuge.
It does. Fans are consistently drawn to K content because it feels less aggressive, it avoids unnecessary drama, and crucially, it avoids the sexually objectifying, graphic, ugly, obscene elements that saturate other popular cultures.
We have specific feedback from enthusiasts who state that American pop has become too graphic, ugly, obscene, and female objectifying, and the perceived purity of K-pop makes it content they feel comfortable sharing with their children. This isn't just an aesthetic choice, is it? It's an integrity choice.
And we see this integrity most clearly in how affection is portrayed in K-dramas. The focus is almost always on building deep emotional relationships rather than rushing to physical intimacy.
The slow burn.
The ultimate slow burn. The tension and anticipation are drawn out. A fan put it beautifully, noting that in K-dramas, even just holding hands makes my heart racing.
Which stands in stark contrast to Western shows where sexual intimacy is often immediate and explicit, sometimes reducing characters to, functional relationships.
This slow, deliberate pacing translates the Jong aesthetic, that slow permeation of attachment, right onto the screen.
Okay, so beyond the content's integrity, there is the undeniable high quality of the packaging. K-pop is constantly hailed as the total package.
That phrase speaks to a synthesis of creative art and technological perfection. The production quality is immense. Mesmerizing choreography, high-budget music videos, and a relentless attention to detail in styling, set dressing, and camera work seen across weekly music shows.
It's marketed as art.
And it's received as undeniable art, where every single element feels intentional.
And that artistic perfection is complemented by the merchandise strategy, which seems designed to strengthen the listener's investment in the Wuri structure of the fandom.
Exactly. They ensure the physical product is as aesthetically pleasing as the digital one. The effort put into the design of physical albums, the inclusion of unique photo cards, elaborate season's greetings.
Things you can't get from a download.
Exactly. It gives fans something tangible they simply cannot access digitally. This encourages collecting, shared excitement, and it deepens fan investment, tying right back to that dedication required for the collective.
Let's talk about cultural flow. Fans seem to appreciate K-pop's hybridization because they see it as absorbing culture rather than exploiting it, which sort of challenges the Western notion that popular music has to be ethnically specific.
Well, hybridity is natural to cultural evolution, but K-pop excels at integrating global influences. Hip-hop, R&B, EDM, and seamlessly filtering them through a distinct Korean aesthetic.
So the end product feels new.
The resulting product feels sophisticated, uniquely styled, and critically non-coercive. It says, we're drawing from global founds, but this remains distinctively ours.
And here's where the aesthetic becomes politically and socially relevant globally. The rise of fluid gender representation.
A huge point.
The successful commodification of soft masculinity, the Konmanam or flower boy aesthetic, is appreciated everywhere. We see male idols wearing makeup, doing Asian-cute actions, and displaying a vulnerability that would be, frankly, mocked in many Western contexts.
This is one of the most powerful ideological shifts K-culture has driven internationally. Fans, including male fans, consistently report that this aesthetic acts as a liberation from the rigid American cultural expectation that men must be a stone booth, a statue of no emotion.
That's a great quote.
It is. The idea that showing any sort of vulnerability is seen as weak is directly countered by the K-pop idol's performance of highly stylized, emotional, and expressive masculinity.
So the ideal of manhood itself is being reframed for some international audiences. I saw one male fan confess that his ideal had shifted away from the tall dude muscles being huge and bulky towards a recognition that emotion and expression are innately human, not feminine traits to be suppressed.
And furthermore, this challenges persistent Western media stereotypes. For far too long, mainstream U.S. media has tended to typecast Asian men as nerdy and thin, or has feminized them to bolster the perceived attractiveness of white male leads. The visibility of K-drama and K-pop male leads as attractive, multifaceted, and globally successful individuals directly counters that stereotype. K-culture provides an alternative, highly visible model of attractive masculinity that is not based on traditional Western hypermasculine standards.
We've established the core psychological mandate, the Jong and Wuri-ness, and the highly polished, integrity-focused aesthetic. Now, we need to map how this translates into the massive, dedicated global fandom. The mechanism has to start with emotional proximity.
K-culture content is expertly crafted to arouse this sense of emotional proximity, a feeling of deep connection that intentionally bypasses geographical, linguistic, or racial barriers.
As that proximity is rooted in the collective structure we discussed.
It is. Fans feel they have found a sense of shared community, that valuable Wuri-ness, which offers a powerful counter-narrative to the highly individualized, often isolating, we are not together nature of contemporary Western society.
So for many, this collective integrity and this wholesome content, it acts as a profound emotional outlet, maybe even a psychological refuge.
That's absolutely key. For audiences who are fatigued by the cultural noise of aggressiveness and violence, this content becomes a hope for a better place.
Hope for a better place.
It resonates with values, modesty, kindness, consideration, that they feel their own culture has lost. They are finding a different, non-threatening level of integrity.
And this inherent worriness is the secret sauce for its deployment as alternative soft power.
Exactly. Soft power is the ability to attract and influence others without coercion. And Korea's cultural position is uniquely non-threatening because it has not been a major historical colonizer or oppressor in the way that Western powers have been perceived.
There's no historical baggage.
Or at least much less of it on the global stage. This allows the Korean wave to operate as a non-coercive, post-Western form of soft power. It attracts rather than imposes, providing isolated global audiences with the sense of community they are actively craving.
And that collective dynamic, which starts all the way back with Jong, is perfectly mirrored in fandom practices.
Perfectly. The fandom structure is characterized by collaboration and negotiation, rather than the intense, often hyper-competitive struggles sometimes seen in Western fan communities battling industry giants.
You can see tangible manifestations of this.
All the time. Unified fan chants at concerts, massive group donations to charity made in an idol's name, and the industry's calculated efforts to treat fans as valued adjunct producers. At K-pop concerts, fans observe a powerful visual display of Wuri-ness, a profound unison, and a feeling of being all together.
This high degree of emotional and social reward, then, explains the intense commitment. Fans become autodidacts. They become self-teachers, investing heavily to accumulate cultural capital.
And the investment goes far beyond simply streaming music. They extend their interest deep into the culture, the food, the language, Hangul, the history, and even the politics.
And this investment is fueled by what?
By a desire for appreciation and validity, not just from fellow fans, but from the general Korean public.
They seek to be fully integrated, not just, cultural tourists.
Precisely. Fans view a lack of effort to learn the language or the cultural context as arrogant or even rude. They express a sincere desire to be a participant in our cultural exchange, not simply a consumer. This drive for cultural capital demonstrates the power of K-pop as a gateway.
It's not just a gateway to music, but to the full ecology of Korean culture.
It serves as the initial entry point, pulling fans deeper into K-dramas, variety shows, and eventually socio-political issues related to the country. It expands their cultural boundaries and fosters genuine personal growth. One fan noted that K-pop made them aware of how much they didn't know about the world outside their own American bubble, highlighting the profound educational effect this initial exposure can have.
Okay, now we have to address the complex issue that arises when these global flows meet local history: cultural appropriation.
Yes, there is an inherent disjuncture in socio-historical context, especially regarding the K-pop industry's frequent incorporation of hip-hop and R&B elements.
Because the history isn't the same.
Right. Since Korea does not share the same history of minstrelsy and deep-seated racial politics as the United States, cross-cultural misunderstandings are, well, they're inevitable.
This necessitates what the sources refer to as reciprocal sensitivity. Fans are calling for the Korean artists and the industry to actively research the historical context of African-American culture when they borrow from it.
It's a call for accountability in the global exchange. But the challenge is multidirectional. American audiences also struggle with reading Korean hybridity accurately.
Oh, how so?
They often project their own racialized lens and conflate K-pop identity with existing Asian American stereotypes. This projection often limits the readability of the Korean artist's own cultural position and their hybridity.
But the very nature of the US K-wave fandom, which is intensely multiracial and multicultural, is forcing a critical mirror onto American culture itself.
That's the positive feedback loop at work. The visibility and success of a non-Western cultural product, particularly one embraced by diverse racial groups in the U.S., actively promotes diversity awareness and challenges the persistent white-centric mindset that has historically dominated American media.
It disrupts the old hierarchies.
It disrupts the cultural and racial superiority complex by showing that powerful, compelling culture can originate anywhere.
Okay, so let's bring this all together.
Our deep dive has illuminated that the global ascendancy of K-culture is a profound case study in how cultural globalization truly operates. The aesthetic export, The mesmerizing K-pop, the high production quality, the emotionally resonant K-drama is so successful not because of its surface shine,
Right.
but because it effectively and subtly packages a deeply indigenous, collective, and restrained emotional ethos that is Jong and Wuri-ness.
This cultural design, which deliberately prioritizes non-coercive connection, shared experience, and emotional integrity over the aggressive individualism and hypersexualization common in many other global media exports. It offers a globally appealing, non-threatening alternative model of modernity.
It does.
It offers community, connection, and emotional authenticity to audiences who are increasingly isolated and fatigued by the chaos and the autonomy-driven expectations of Western society.
The ability to fuse that deeply embedded traditional emotional integrity with cutting-edge technological hybridity is the source of its profound resonance. It's what transforms it from a passing trend into a global reference point for modern cultural consumption and connection.
And what's truly powerful about this phenomenon is that the movement of the Korean wave is not unilateral. It's not a one-way street.
Not at all.
Its unexpected global popularity, the sheer number of international multicultural fans, acts as a powerful mirror, compelling Korea, which is one of the world's most historically homogeneous countries, to become increasingly aware of the global diversity and multiculturalism of its own fan base.
Which is a huge internal shift.
It is. This dynamic is actualizing a powerful, multi-directional flow of cultural influence that is changing not just how the world views Korea, but how Korea views the world.